Sat Sri Akal. My name's Dr. Sakit and I work with Colourful Heritage. Today we are doing this unique multi-faith event to try and educate the community, the wider community, our next generation, about the contribution of the British Indian Army, which consists of Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus during World War II. So this is part of VE Day 80 commemorations. And today we'll be having nearly 90 people attending our event today.
And all the people are from different communities, and we've got members of the armed forces here as well supporting us. So ਸਾਡੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਲੜੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਕਿੱਥੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਲੜੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ 2 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ 1 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ। ਤਾਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਸਾਡੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੀ ਕਹਾਣੀਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ। ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਨਾ ਜੀ ਸੀਗੇ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ 2 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਪਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਿਰਫ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਦੇਰ ਹੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਾ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਹਾਣੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਇਹ ਖ਼ਤਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ। ਸੋ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਆ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਵਿਕਟਰੀ ਇਨ ਯੂਰਪ ਡੇ 80 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੀਏ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੀ ਕੰਟਰੀਬਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ, ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ, ਹਿੰਦੂਆਂ ਦੀ, ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੀ ਕੰਟਰੀਬਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਸੀਗੀ, ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਦੀ ਨਾ ਭੁੱਲਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਪਨੀਰੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ।
And I guess I want to add to that the Scotland's unique connection, which is with Force K6, which is a group of soldiers that came to help out the British Expeditionary Forces in France, and eventually they escaped from Dunkirk and made their way to Scotland. And there's several of them buried here, nearly 13 of them are buried here. So in the future, what we plan to do is to build a memorial just outside Kelvin Grove Art Gallery to try and commemorate and remember the huge sacrifices and contribution of nearly 4 million soldiers from multi-faith during World War I and World War II.
ਤੇ ਨਾਲੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਗਲਾਸਗੋ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਕਨੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਗਿਆਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਗਲਾਸਗੋ ਵਿੱਚ। ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ VC ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਜਿੱਤਿਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਵਰਲਡ ਵਾਰ ਵਿੱਚ। ਇੱਥੇ ਐਕਸੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ VC ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਵਿਨਰਸ ਸੀਗੇ, ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਆ ਕੇ ਦੇਖੋ ਇੱਥੇ ਸੈਂਟਰਲ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਗਲਾਸਗੋ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ,
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Sat Sri Akal. I'm pleased to be here with you at the Central Gurdwara this afternoon, representing the Presbytery of Glasgow in the Church of Scotland. I'm the moderator this year, and I'm pleased to be able to attend this event commemorating the often forgotten soldiers of Southeast Asia who fought with allies all over Europe and the wider world in World War II. I visited parts of East Asia, what is now Myanmar and Burma, Singapore and Hong Kong, and there I've been met with people who have not only been involved in the battles of World War II, but have had to live with the consequences, either because they have been injured or because families have been in some way divided. And so it's important that we remember people who have made that sacrifice, and that we teach our children that war is not the way of the world. War is not the best way for human beings to live. And so we must make every effort to live together in peace in all races, in all parts of the world, and amongst all religions. So I'm pleased to be here representing the Church of Scotland at this event to convey that message to all who hear it. Thank you.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Krishnalal. We represent the Hindu Mandir Glasgow, and my late father, Mr. Tarsim Lal Sharma, was in World War II. Was based in the south near Mumbai, a town called Megaon. There he was serving and looked after the stores, which was the salt, the pepper, the food that was prepared for the soldiers on a daily basis. He'd done that for a few years until the war ended. From there, then he moved over to Great Britain, which is now the United Kingdom, and we were all born. I'll let Manjulika say a few words.
मैं मंजलिका हूँ. मेरा परिवार भी जो है फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर और सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर में उन्होंने भाग लिया और काफ़ी सारे लोग शहीद हुए. उनकी बहुत सारी कहानियाँ हैं, तो जो है नेक्स्ट टाइम मैं उनसे लेके आऊँगी और फिर आपके साथ शेयर करूँगी. मगर उन्होंने पर्सनली जो कहानियाँ बताई हैं मुझे आज तक, वो बहुत ही ज़्यादा अद्भुत कहानियाँ हैं, जो कि बहुत ही इंस्पायरिंग कहानियाँ हैं.
Varji Khalsa, Varji Ki Fateh. Today I am here to commemorate the 80th VE Day. Today we're here at the Gurdwara. In World War I and World War II, we know that the British Indian Army played a crucial role, and it's so important that we recognise this through events like this today. In World War I, we know that there was nearly 1.4 million Indian volunteers that served in World War I. In World War II, we know that there's nearly 2.5 million British Indians that served in the British Indian Army. And this is so important to make sure that this is recognised, and events like this keep that story alive, because it's so important. So many people lost their lives, so many people were injured, and so many people were misplaced. To this day, we don't know where they are. So events like this pass on our story from, decades on, that our children will understand what role the British Indian Army played in World War I and World War II, but also their children will understand. And I think it's also important that we actually recognise all the work done, because today we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't even be here talking about it or celebrating if those people in the British Indian Army didn't fight and gave their life up so that we could have our today. Varji Khalsa, Varji Ki Fateh.
Sat Sri Akal. My name is Kokab Stewart, and I'm the MSP for Glasgow Kelvin, where the Gurdwara is located, that we are here today to commemorate the 80th anniversary of VE Day. And it's a particularly important occasion because we are remembering and commemorating the contribution that was made by the South Indian Asian population during the World Wars I and II. It's really important that organisations such as the Colourful Heritage are amplifying the work and the role that was played by our Southeast Asian heritage soldiers towards the World War, and they have also produced a wide variety of resources which are being used in schools to make sure that our next generations are aware of the contribution that was made to make sure that we could all go on and live safely.
Sat Sri Akal, Namaste, Assalamu Alaikum, and good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, had I known there was going to be this much paparazzi here, I would have whitened my teeth before I came. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to welcome you all to the Central Gurdwara Singh Sabha to share in this unique multi-faith event commemorating the forgotten soldiers of Southeast Asia. So today we are commemorating VE Day 80, a nationwide opportunity to come together to remember 80 years of peace and freedom, honouring all those who served and sacrificed. Millions of people around the UK will be commemorating this week across faiths, cultures, diverse backgrounds, different languages, uniting over shared freedom and democracy. Now, VE 80 Day, as we know, lies on the 8th of May, but is also being commemorated nationwide on Bank Holiday Monday, the 5th of May, with the Great British Food Festival, sharing food and stories. Now, this is probably what is so important about all of us coming together today from so many different backgrounds. There will be an opportunity to share stories as we partake in the langar upstairs after the event. There's some beautiful food that's been prepared by the volunteers here, pakoras, samosas, and some lovely sweets with cups of not tea but chai. All right. So please use those opportunities to share and to introduce yourselves to everyone round about. So our event today at the Central Gurdwara, in partnership with Colourful Heritage, is part of this, with a multi-faith session sharing our collective shared history, highlighting the contribution of the forgotten soldiers of the British Indian Army. And I was taking a keen interest in just listening into some of the interviews that were taking place there. And, and for some people it's so personal. And for some people they have had, close family members, also partaking. So today we honour the veterans and civilians who sacrificed so much to secure the peace, freedom, and way of life we enjoy today. It's a day to remember their efforts and to thank our Second World War veterans. The whole country will be coming together, standing shoulder to shoulder, remembering our shared humanity, our shared values, and the need to continue to work together for peace. So it would be my honour, before I introduce Mrs. Ravinder Kaur Nijjar, just to kind of share a couple of messages that we've also received from a couple of folk that were unable to attend today. So the First Minister, Right Honourable John Sweeney, sends his best wishes to those commemorating the British Indian Army's efforts. The Right Honourable Lord Provost of Glasgow, Councillor Jacqueline McLaren, shares this message. I am so sorry not to be able to be here in person today, remembering nations across Europe coming together to unite and celebrate 80 years of peace since the end of World War II. A war that so many millions paid the ultimate sacrifice. And you all gather here today to remember, in particular, all the forgotten soldiers of Southeast Asia. Over 2.5 million soldiers from present-day India and Pakistan served to protect Britain in World War II. Thank you to Colourful Heritage and the Central Gurdwara for holding this important event of remembrance and reflection of the forgotten South Asian soldiers. As we honour the past, we look to the future with a hope for peace. On behalf of all the citizens of Glasgow, as Lord Provost, I am grateful, and may we never forget. So I think those strong words really put everything in perspective. At this moment in time, I would like to introduce Mrs. Ravinder Kaur Nijjar, who is the Chair of Sikhs in Scotland and Sikh representative on the Scottish Religious Leaders Forum. She is an interfaith consultant, and she has initiated collaborative interfaith projects across faith communities, both nationally and internationally, for the last 35 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Prithpal. I will start by the Sikh greeting. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Brothers and sisters, it is an honour and a privilege to be speaking today, commemorating the forgotten soldiers of South Asia on the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. As has been said, the British Indian Army contributed 1.5 million servicemen in the First World War and a staggering 2.5 million soldiers in the Second World War, the largest volunteer army in history at that time. Indian soldiers fought in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Those brave men who came to Britain's aid were sons, brothers, husbands, fathers, and uncles. For the Sikhs who answered the Allies' call in that war, it went to the heart of their faith to fight against tyranny and oppression anywhere in the world. In April, Sikhs around the world celebrated Vaisakhi to commemorate the first initiation ceremony in 1699 by the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji. He proclaimed that an initiated or baptized Sikh is to be a saint soldier, a sant sipahi, a guardian of a righteous world. He or she must develop the virtues of a saint: love, compassion, humility, selflessness, but also have virtues of courage and bravery to protect and become a guardian for the whole of humanity. So thousands of Sikhs signed up and made the ultimate sacrifice far from their homes. During World War II, 3 Indian divisions, the 4th, 8th, and 10th, fought in Europe, and they were all heavily involved in the Italian campaign from 1943 to 1945. The 4th Indian Infantry Division fought in Italy at the Battle of Monte Cassino, 1944, Gothic Line, and later deployed in Greece as a stabilization force after the German withdrawal. The 8th Indian Infantry Division also fought in Italy at the Battle of Sangro River, 1943, advanced through Liri Valley, 1944, Battle for the Gothic Line, 1944, Spring Offensive in Italy, Operation Grapeshot, 1945. And the 1st Punjab Regiment, 11th Sikh Regiment, and 15th Punjab Regiment were part of the 4th and 8th Indian Infantry Divisions. Also involved were Force K6, the Royal Indian Army Service Corps, who supported logistics for the British Expeditionary Forces in France, and some soldiers were at Dunkirk and evacuated and sent to Scotland. My colleague Dr. Saki will be speaking about Force K6 later on. However, we must also remember the families who were waiting for their loved ones to return, hoping and praying that they would never receive the dreaded telegram, killed in action or missing in action. Our daughter-in-law's grandfather was taken as a prisoner of war in Germany at the beginning of the war. There was no word of his whereabouts for 5 years. His wife's parents, after 3 years of not receiving any news, suggested to their daughter that she should marry again. But she refused, convinced that he was still alive. 2 years later, he returned home. Whilst clearing out my father's house as he passed away last year in May, I found out that my maternal grandfather, who died when my mum was only 16, was also in the British Indian Army, and my uncle fought in Burma during World War II. Civilians also helped greatly with the war effort. My father-in-law, who came to Glasgow in 1938 to work for a year and then go back home, but was unable to because war broke out. And he contributed by working in the Royal Ordnance Factory in Bishopton. Later, he contracted blood cancer, probably due to the chemical dust in the air when filling the bombs, and died in 1964. There will be lots of family stories, which I hope will not disappear into the ether of history. We need to find out and record them, which I hope will happen when the first British Indian Army Memorial in Scotland will be built in the grounds of Kelvingrove Museum, with your help and donations. For those who never made it home, there are several memorials in Europe commemorating Indian soldiers who served in World War II. Key locations include Italy and France, where significant Indian Army involvement was recorded. Sangro River Cremation Memorial, Irps, the Forley Cremation Memorial, commemorates nearly 800 Hindu, Sikh soldiers and Muslim soldiers who were buried there, and Rimini Cremation Memorial, to name a few. Many Sikh soldiers were awarded honours for their acts of bravery during the First and Second World Wars, amongst them several Victoria Crosses. And we are honoured to have the Victoria Cross of Naik Gyan Singh in Glasgow, who was awarded the VC Cross for his bravery and gallantry during the Second World War, now kept in Glasgow by his family. An exhibition of VC Cross winners and the contribution of Sikh soldiers is permanently displayed on the ground floor of this Gurdwara, and I hope you get an opportunity to view it. This year, the Royal Mail has issued a special set of stamps to mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day. The collection of 10 stamps honour men and women who made significant contributions during World War II. The stamps include Royal Air Force and Indian Air Force pilot Mahinder Singh Puji, who was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. He flew Hurricanes, protecting coastal convoys and intercepting bombers and fighters when Hitler ordered the bombing of London. He survived several crashes and flew combat missions throughout the war in Britain, Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and Burma. And in conclusion, war means sacrifice. War means losing family. Let us learn from the past and not let our forefathers sacrifice in vain. Have we not learned anything, as there is still war going on in Europe? Let us all come together and inspire present and future generations to work together for peace. Thank you. And I would now like to introduce Dr. Sakib Razak from Colourful Heritage. She's the project officer and head of research, which preserves inspirational stories of South Asian and Muslim elders in Scotland. She has helped to compile the digital Schools Resources Pack for teachers jointly with Glasgow Museums, which is available on Colourful Heritage website. In 2023, she was instrumental in setting up the Glaswegians' contributions to South Asians in World War II exhibition based at Kelvingrove Art Galleries. And she will be taking over the rest of the afternoon's event, and I can now relax. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ravinder, for that lovely, talked about the Saint Soldier concept. And of course, the VC Cross for Naik Gyan Singh is actually on display at the Glaswegians exhibition at Kelvingrove Art Galleries, which is where our memorial will be. But without further ado, we'll carry on with the rest of the programme. And I'd like to now invite Dr. Pam Gossel, MBE, MSP. She's the Deputy Chair, Scottish Conservatives. And she will now come on board and talk about the importance of the British Indian Army's contribution during World War I and II.
Vaheguru Ji Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Fateh. Good afternoon, Sat Sri Akal, Namaskar, and Assalamu Alaikum. I want to start with thanking who made today possible. Obviously, thank you very much, Dr. Saki, for Cultural Heritage, but also thank you very much to this Central Gurdwara Committee that today this event is taking place. I'm particularly very much honoured to be standing here today, not just to basically talk about what's happened in the past, but also to talk about today. But also to look at, I think it's a personal honour being one of the first women of colour in the Scottish Parliament alongside Kukab Stewart, but also very first Indian woman and the very first Sikh in the Scottish Parliament. So I take great honour to stand here today to commemorate the 80th VE Day. Right round the world, everybody will be celebrating this, And yes, it's on the 8th of May. In the Scottish Parliament, we will be doing our own things. There will be talks, debates, there will be events. But in my local area, I will be also going out to make sure that we honour those soldiers that basically fought for us. The British Indian Army in World War I, as Ravinder said, that I think round about over 1.4 million, 1.5 million, roughly around volunteers went out to fight for the whole world, basically, for us especially here. And that was, at that time, one of the largest forces of volunteers. And then you go into World War II. Over 2.5 million volunteers fought in that for us. We mustn't forget this, because I know, certainly growing up, I remember Remembrance Day comes, VE Day comes. I didn't know my history, and I'm not going to stand here and lie. I didn't know, because a lot of people didn't speak about it. We're so lucky that we have people like Dr. Saki, Ravinder, and the Gurdwara committees around Scotland and around the UK and around the world speaking about this today. I would never have known what crucial role the British Indian Army played. We would never have known how brave those soldiers were. I think roundabout in World War I, over 70,000 lost their lives. And that's only what can be counted. But remember, so many didn't go back home. So many were injured. In World War II, we've got a statement stating that over 80,000 soldiers died. But again, how many didn't go home? And how many are injured? And how many families today, generations on, are talking about this? And this is why in Parliament, as one of the members of Parliament, it's important that we keep this alive. I know many people out there may not think that the British Indian Army didn't play a part, and it's not because they're ignorant, they didn't. It's what they don't know. And events like this are so important. And I have to say, I was very, very fortunate to be part of the groundbreaking ceremony for the memorial outside the Kelvin Grove galleries. Now that's very important, because that recognises basically Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs and many others. People can come together. They can think about their past relatives. They can talk about it. Children, a lot of the work that Dr. Saki has been doing with Cultural Heritage, I think it's so important that we pass everything we know on. Otherwise, the generations to come will never ever know what happened and what brave work the British Indian Army did. Because if it wasn't for them, we would not be here today. And I agree with Ravinder, I'm in politics, but we do have to make sure, working cross-party, that something like this never happens again. Because we can't give up our brothers and sisters, our mums and dads, our aunties and uncles, our friends, our nephew and nieces, our children. It can't happen again. And everybody knows what's going on in the world. We need to make sure that we have a sensible head on us, especially in the Scottish Parliament, working cross-party to make sure something like this never happens again. But also, I think the word, I was just saying earlier on, speaking, the British Indian Army, the words are very important, but a lot of people forget British Indian Army, who were the people behind it? There were people from the Sikh religion. There were people from the Muslim religion. There were people basically from the Hindu religion and many others. So we mustn't forget, even though at that time there was no partition, India was one, but every faith came together to fight. And that's why World War I and World War II definitely should thank and recognise the fact that every single event happening around the UK and around the world, never forget the British Indian Army were a crucial part to play, and that's why we are here today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Pam. I think you talked about the memorial work, and of course, in order to get this memorial, there was many school children that were involved to help with the design of this. And during my talk, I will show you some pictures of this as well. So my talk today is about Force Case 6 and their unique connection to Scotland. So Pam talked about the work that we've done with the schools, and this is just an example of some of the schools packs that Colourful Heritage have made. And if you look at the very first two, they are about the British Indian Army, which of course encompasses present-day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. And these are both packs for World War I and World War II that go out to schools, and schools actually can look up and download and do the activities and teach pupils of this important the important history that we have. So I'll not spend too long on this, but next slide please. But that's something you can download from our website. So the contingent I want to talk about today is Force K6 soldiers in Abbeymoor. And if you look to the left, you can see the picture of these soldiers. This is a picture of the Force K6 soldiers that came from Bombay, travelled to France, and then from France, some of them escaped from Dunkirk, which is a very little known fact. If anybody's seen the film by Anthony Nolan, Dunkirk, you'll see that the Indian soldiers are missed out. So these were Indian Muslim soldiers, and this is them in Abbeymoor with their animals. And you know, to know that they came here in June 1942, where there was nothing there, and that's where they would gather together and cook and have chapati, share the food with the local community as well. So there's nearly 1,700 of these soldiers that came to Scotland, and some of the other slides I'll show will also show you the soldiers. There's graves of these soldiers in Scotland. This is just a quick schematic. It's also on our posters as well, that shows that they came to Bombay, and some of them escaped from Dunkirk, from St Nazaire, and then eventually made their way to Cornwall, and then through Wales, where some of them are buried as well, into Scotland. Now they came here for a very special operation called Operation Jupiter, which was something that Winston Churchill had ordered at the time. Again, I'll not go into it in too much detail, but it was to do with invading the Norwegian airspaces, the Norwegian airfields, where there was Germans located at the time. But of course that didn't happen. And what they did do was come to Scotland to do mountain warfare training. So they were left here to try and cope with the weather, the different customs, and to try and get used to the weather before they were transported to Norway. And of course that didn't happen, but they were still here for at least a year and a half, nearly 18 to 20 months they were here. Okay, next slide. This is just to show you some of the pictures of the soldiers. The ones on the left are, you can see a soldier playing with some young children. He's got a wooden toy horse in Ballater. They were located in Golspie, up north in the Highlands, and of course in Laird as well. Can I just have a quick show of hands of people that have heard of Force K6 before today? Okay, quite a few of them, good. And what about a show of hands of people that have been with me to Canusie in the last 5-6 years? Okay, quite a few people. So this is the Canusie graveyard, gravesite where 9 of these soldiers are buried. One of them is cremated near Aberdeen, so 14 in total are laid to rest in Scotland, and 9 of them in this cemetery. And what we have is one of the soldiers that was here. We have a portrait of him hanging at Kelvin Grove Art Galleries, and that's a portrait there showing Abdul Ghani. It's on display at the Glasgow Asians exhibition. Every year we take up many people to go and pay their respects. We have people from the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, multi-faith communities come up with us. We'll do a presentation, we'll do talks there as well. So many of the people have seen these. And you can see these graves are very well looked after. You can see they're looked after actually by the Commonwealth Graves Commission. But before that, there was a very special lady that looked after them. And you can see there's flowers. She tended to the graves actually at the time. And I think the next slide, please. So before I started going to show you a picture of the lady, this was just some pictures of our remembrance service from the last couple of years that we do every single year. Next picture. So this is Isabel Harling, who looked after those graves for up to about 70 years, her and her family tended to those graves. And she lived in Canusie till about 100 years old. She passed away in 2023. And it's such a beautiful story. I've met her. She selflessly tended to these. She used to go in, there was a grave digger there, she used to go in and ask him if she could plant the flowers. She would lay poppies, she would lay crosses, she would ask her children to come and lay flowers on Easter and birthdays, because the simple reason, she wanted for their memory, she wanted for the people in Pakistan and India, who's, you know, the sons of those people who came all this way, to remember these soldiers. And what's really important actually about the graves that are buried in Kunusi, and majority of them in Scotland, is that they're all from the Pakistan side of India. So they're all from places like Rawalpindi, from Gujarat. And of course, one of our volunteers last year had gone and managed to find the relatives of one of the soldiers that's buried in Kunusi, called Muhammad. So what Isabel said was, they came over from home and they gave their lives for us, so it's only right that we look after them. She was awarded a British Empire Medal for her services to the soldiers. And just as a reminder, this is a picture of the memorial that they have in Kennedy for just the Force K6 soldiers that are buried on Scottish soil. So if you're ever in Kunusi, definitely worth a visit. And today's event and talk, I'd like to actually dedicate this to Dr. Guy Bauman. He's the man who's done his PhD and research on this particular Force K6. He spent nearly 5 years studying these soldiers and their histories. He's been out to India, Pakistan, he's come to visit people that knew these soldiers in the Highlands, and this is the book that he's written, The Indian Contingent. Now the reason I am highlighting this is Dr. Guy Bauman is not very well actually at the moment at all. So he's been diagnosed with with a very severe form of cancer. So I wanted to dedicate today, because he couldn't be here, he was invited. But without his work, we owe a huge debt of gratitude, because not only has he brought the Pakistani community, but the Hindu community and the Indian community in terms of India, Pakistan together with this shared heritage. So just before I finish, I just wanted to show you a couple of pictures of some surviving veterans. This is Sergeant Muhammad Hussain. He's turned 100 years old just last year, and he still lives in Windsor. His contribution was he fought in the Monte Cassino battle, just like what Auntie Linda had mentioned before. There were so many of our soldiers, uncountable, but he is still, mashallah, surviving today. So hopefully he'll be at some of the events in London in the next couple of days. And somebody else I wanted to highlight, which I know a lot of the younger generation talk about in schools through our work with the schools, is Noor Inayat Khan. She was the first female wireless operator. She's also been on a stamp a couple of years ago. She has a memorial in London, and she was awarded the George Cross Medal for her bravery. She actually gave her life for Britain, so she was awarded the George Cross Medal after she had passed away. Definitely worth exploring her story as well. And this, of course, is Uncle Darbara Singh Bhunar, who's I believe he was the last World War II Sikh veteran in Scotland who actually used to attend this Gurdwara on a regular basis. So 5 years ago during lockdown, Victory in Japan 75, we had arranged for him to go and lay a wreath alongside the then Prince Charles, the now King Charles, at the Arboretum down south. So we have his interview on our website as well, if anybody's interested to have a listen. Fascinating. He fought in Burma, but the stories he comes up with, the difficulties, it's really heartbreaking. So I had interviewed him here within this Gurdwara, and it was really emotional to find out the difficulties that he faced, the things that he came up with you can't even imagine. So definitely worth a listen, and check out some of the other stories, including Nate Gayan's story as well on the website. So this was one of the pictures that's in our poster, and it's also the poster for this event. And I just wanted to quickly highlight this one, because that's Nate Gayan Singh on the left there, and he's wearing his Victoria Cross, and he's standing shoulder to shoulder with Khudadad Khan. And Khudadad Khan was the first Indian Muslim, because this is before partition, who was awarded a Victoria Cross. So this came out of a family album in Glasgow. And of course, we have the Victoria Cross for Nate Gayan Singh at the Glaswegians exhibition at Kelvin Grove. So I just thought it was a nice story, and also it highlights Pakistan's involvement as well, because Khuda Dad Khan is from a village called Jakwal. So it's, I guess for me, this is one of my most favourite pictures. It brings together India and Pakistan, sums it up in one picture, and you know how they fought against fascism in World War II, and of course for Khuda Dad Khan was in World War I. Incidentally, that picture was taken outside Buckingham Palace because every 2 years they would come together for a gathering, all the VC awardees. So this is just a quick picture to show you what the gallery inside the Kelvin Grove Art Galleries looks like, which is where the exhibition is. It's got Jagat Singh's story in it as well. It's got Force Case 6. It's got some video footage of Gyan Singh, some of the other work that we've done, and then of course the soldiers that are buried in Canusi and up north as well. Okay. So before I finish up, just very quickly, we are, like Pam said, we are looking to build a memorial outside Kelvin Grove Art Galleries. This is some of the sort of artists' impressions. It looks very similar to the turrets that are in Kelvin Grove Galleries. If you look at the roof of the gallery, and it will hopefully be in red sandstone. There'll be different pillars. Different pillars will have different faith symbols on them. We'll have some QR codes. We're trying to incorporate some flowers of the different countries that were involved. And at the moment, we are looking to raise funds for this. We've got about 60,000 at the moment, but we need to try and raise just over 270,000, closer to 300,000. So any help would be appreciated. And we've also got a campaign for if anybody would like to have their name on the memorial. There's a £10,000 campaign, so £10,000 to have their name on. And I think we've got maybe about 5 spaces left now, so quite a few spaces have already been taken up. So if anybody's interested, come and speak to me afterwards. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Okay, next I'd like to ask Bob Stewart, MSP, Minister for Equalities, to come up and say a few words on her own personal connection with the British Indian Army and a little bit about the memorial as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here as the constituency MSP, just to make that clear that that's the capacity that I'm attending this afternoon. I'd like to thank Colourful Heritage, Sikhs in Scotland, and to the Central Gurdwara as well for bringing us all together on such an occasion. I was asked to just share a very brief short story that actually came about at the breaking of the ground when the at Kelvin Grove Art Gallery, when we all went there where the memorial hopefully is going to be, and you've heard the pitch already for the money, and I'd like to echo that as well. There's fundraising events going on ongoing for that. But after that, I was reflecting back and just having a chat, and the memory that came back was of my father. And it was one of these incidental conversations that take place, and you don't know where it's going to go. So I knew that he was an engineer, and he had worked in sort of engineering factories when he had come over from Pakistan, down in England, in Corby, around that area. And then it turned out that actually the link was that his grandfather, turned out to be engineers for the British Army. And I didn't know that at all. I thought, my goodness me. So not only did we talk about that, but then he went into a cupboard and he produces this really, really rusty, sort of innocuous looking tin and opens it up, and there is a collection of medals that had been awarded and just put away in the cupboard. And I was like, what on earth is this? I mean, I was just agog, as you can imagine, suddenly discovering this sort of treasure trove of history in my family that I was totally unaware of. And my father then brought out this very, very delicate, and you'll forgive me, I can't remember everything that was on it, a very delicate piece of paper with a commendation from the royal family on giving of one of the medals as well. So it was like an authentication that was there. I just felt so privileged to have that insight. It gave an explanation of how we ended up in Britain in the first place, because those who fought or contributed, and we've talked a lot about the soldiers, but it's very important to remember the engineers, the nurses, the catering corps, and all the rest as well, that they also contributed to that effort. And although they are lost to us, the importance of passing down those memories and those connections, explaining some of our own history and knowing how we ended up. So the long and short of it was that we ended up because at that time, if you had contributed to the war effort, you were then able to get a visa to one of the Commonwealth countries. And it was Britain that my father ended up in. And I will leave that story there. And if anyone wants to know any more details about it, I'm quite happy to share. Of course, I've been a woeful daughter in the sense that on the one hand, what I want to do is to put that collection, have it cleaned up and get it in a display cabinet. And I know that you can see all of that at Kelvin Grove Museum and things, but there's a part of me that wants to keep it in that rusty tin box and just sort of appreciate the fact that it was hidden for so long. And whilst there was a quiet pride to the contribution of this country and the contribution of the war effort, and I want to sort of respect that. But perhaps one day I will sort of have it on display for the world to enjoy. But in the meantime, I can only share that story with you. So thank you very much for listening. And I suppose I'll just end on the point that each individual life that was given has a family that's remembering them through the generations, and how important it is on events like this that we continue to remember that for the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colca, for sharing that story. Every time I hear that story, there's so many stories like that, within the community in Glasgow, because there's so many people from the Punjab area. So whenever I hear that, it reminds me of some of the other ones that I've heard as well. So thank you so much. And I think that brings us on very nicely to our next speaker, which is Duncan Dornan, Chair of Board of Museum and Gallery Scotland, and he will share the role of museums in remembering the British Indian Army contribution.
Thank you, Sakib. I'm delighted, honoured to be here speaking to you today. Sakib kindly mentioned my current role. Until autumn of last year, I was actually head of museums in Glasgow, and so was fortunate to work with Colourful Heritage actually for about 10 years in developing some new displays within our museums. Initially, that contact was around the establishment of the Bashir Mine Archive as part of Glasgow City Council's archives, held in the Mitchell, just down the street from where we are today. A really important resource at recording the lived experience of people coming from South Asia and establishing new lives here in Glasgow, and importantly to look back on them to provide that family history of people who've settled and created families and a strong community here. Having established that archive, we were conscious we needed to move on to the next phase, and that was critically about establishing appropriate interpretation and appropriate collections within the wider museum service to reflect that important community within the city and within Scotland more broadly. And so we started off with community consultation events, and that was to establish what people within the community really wanted to see as the first priorities represented in museums. The relevance of that is that what came out most strongly from that consultation was that people were only too conscious that the role of the British Indian Army in that broadest sense was simply not represented in museum displays and interpretation, nor in the collections. And so that was one of the things that we were pushed really to establish at the very start. And so we've mentioned briefly the Scotland Street exhibition, which is really our first attempt, our first pass at representing this community history more comprehensively, and the British Indian Army was a major focus for that. Since then, as Dr. Sakib has mentioned, we've moved on to establish displays within Kelvin Grove and indeed in Riverside, looking particularly at the role of the Lascar communities working on the ships in Glasgow and their role in establishing Glasgow as a really major port. But my role here today is to explain why this matters. So I think I've touched on one already. When we talked to communities, one of the things they felt strongly about was that this museum service was not talking about the role of the Indian Army. So museums were able to respond to communities and actually expressing stories and giving people access to information which otherwise can be all too easily hidden and lost from sight, particularly over the passage of time. But I think more importantly, museums are a really powerful communication channel. For those of you who don't visit museums regularly, you might question that assertion, but I can provide some facts to I hope to back that up. So within Glasgow, a city of 600,000 people, the museum service enjoys around 4 million visits annually. So not just from people living in the city, but people from more broadly across Scotland and indeed from across the world coming to Glasgow, and it's an opportunity for them to learn about the real history of the population of this city. In addition to that, we know from audience research carried out with people who do visit museums that they see museums as an authentic and reliable source of information. So we provide facts in museums, people come and they accept that as being the truth, and they can allow that to inform their perspective on these events. So it's a powerful way to explain the role of the Indian Army, which is often overlooked, but also in an environment where people will take on board what they're told and will begin to reshape the perception of these world events. And that's hugely important, both to the city, but also to people of South Asian heritage in the city, that these facts are shared and the truth is told about these events. So for that reason, it's vitally important that you all support your museum, but also that we work together to improve the quality of the collections and also to improve the quality and extent of our interpretation, so that we actually share this information with the widest possible audience. And so I think that's really the point I wanted to make. Dr. Sakib also asked me to say one or two comments about the memorial, and every speaker has mentioned this. A permanent memorial would be vitally important. It is vitally important. I would have to say, knowing how difficult it could be to raise money for public projects, you're doing very well in such a short space of time. It's made very good progress, but everyone needs to support this to get it over the line, to see this built. We have a fantastic design. It has planning permission. We've had the sod cutting event last year, so actually it's just about completing that fundraising and the memorial would be in place. I think it's a vitally important thing to have at the very heart of Glasgow, in the cultural centre of Glasgow, and to make a very strong point about the role of the Indian Army, and I think also about the role that the South Asian community, people of South Asian heritage, play in the economics and the politics and the life of this city, and their role now and in the war has to be recognised. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Duncan. And I think in terms of for the museum's collections, some of the items we've actually got in the museums have not all been given to the museum. They're more loaned, so they can be loaned for a specific amount of time. So they still belong to the people that have donated them. But it does mean that the items that have been loaned share a story of what reflects Glasgow's diversity and the stories that we want to share. So that's really important. And of course, we're looking to move into People's Palace at some point soon. It's still undergoing refurbishment. So that brings me on nicely to my next speaker, which I'd like to invite up Mr. Andrew Lal. He's the director of Lal & Co, and I'd like him to come and share his personal connection with the British Indian Army through his father. Thank you.
Vaheguru Ji Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. First, I would like to thank Cultural Heritage for putting this event today, along with the Berkeley Street Gurdwara. A big thank you for them, please. A big applause for both of them for doing such a nice job. Thank you very much. Thank you. My late father, some of you probably will know, Mr. Tarsim Lal Sharma, had a warehouse in the Gorbals, which is still there today. But before that, he was in the British Indian Army. He moved from Normal, Punjab, to southern India with the army to a town called Megaon. There, he was given a quite important role to look after the stores, which was the salt, the pepper, whatever foods were required for that particular area. His job was to make sure they were all topped up, fed, blah, blah, blah. So from that, I am quite sure he learned quite a lot about business, how to buy, how to sell. Then when the war ended, he then came to the UK, being part of Great Britain, which is now United Kingdom, part of the British Empire, India was then, and came to Birmingham and eventually ended up in Glasgow. Some of you knew him personally, I think. Uncles here and uncles there. Uncles here knew him personally, Opened a cash and carry warehouse called Lal & Company, which is today we are ourselves running in Coburg Street. But going back to the people who, our soldiers who died for us, that is never mentioned in the schools today. I think it's time that this is brought to the forefront and it is taught within the schools of the British Indian Army that fought for Great Britain, United Kingdom today. It should be educated, it should be taught within the schools. I'll leave it there. Waheguru Ji Ki Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Andrew Lal. I think what you mentioned about this being taught in the schools, none of us, I certainly didn't know about this, so it's really important that it's put into the examinable part of the curriculum, not just our booklets going out to schools or teachers downloading it if they wish to. It should be part of the examinable one for the 3rd, 4th years, 5th years. So hopefully we're looking into doing something about that as well, perhaps an open letter to the Education Secretary, using this as an opportunity with BE Day 80 on this. Okay, so my next speaker I'd like to introduce and invite up is Rear Admiral retired Mark Beverstock. He is the president of the Royal Legion Scotland and Poppy Scotland, and to come and share about remembering the sacrifices of the South Asians in both world wars.
Good afternoon, everyone. What a privilege to be here. This afternoon we're pausing and reflecting on a part of history that is too often forgotten. The immense sacrifices and contributions of the British Indian Army. In our shared remembrance of world wars, we speak of Dunkirk, of Normandy, of the Battle of Britain. But how often do we speak of the more than 2.5 million Indian soldiers, the largest volunteer force in history, who fought under the British flag during the First and Second World Wars? These men came from across the Indian subcontinent. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Gurkhas, men from small villages and great cities alike. They were united not by empire, but by duty, by courage, and by a profound sense of honour. They fought in every major theatre of war, in the trenches of the Western Front, under the burning sun of North Africa, in the thick jungles of Burma, and across the mountains of Italy. But freedom is never free. It comes at a heavy cost. Over 70,000 Indian soldiers lost their lives in the First World War, 87,000 in the Second World War, along with 34,000 wounded and 67,000 captured as prisoners of war. In the Second World War, the British Indian Army played a vital role in halting the advance of the Axis, from El Alamein to Monte Cassino, in North Africa and particularly in Southeast Asia, where the fighting didn't end until later in the year. They fought with extraordinary bravery, earning over 4,000 medals for gallantry. There were 39 Victoria Crosses, the highest military honour. And just think of this statistic. In World War II, there were only 182 Victoria Crosses awarded to 181 recipients in total. And of those, 28 of them were to those who served in the British Indian Army. If you do the mental maths, it's over 16%. But behind every medal was a human story of sacrifice, of separation, of silence. These were fathers, sons, brothers, whose families often never saw them return, and sometimes never even knew where they fell. Field Marshal Sir Claude Auchinleck, Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army from 1942 to 1945, said Britain could not have come through both world wars if it hadn't been for the Indian Army. We must remember them, because remembrance isn't just about the past, it's about truth, it's about justice, it's about connection. In remembering the British Indian Army, we acknowledge a shared history between nations, a history that shaped not just the battlefield, but the very idea of our freedom. We challenge the narrow lens through which war is so often told. We remind ourselves that the victory that we celebrate was built on the backs of the many, not of the few. And today, in a world still fractured by war, still divided by race and religion, their story matters more than ever. It reminds us that courage knows no colour, that sacrifice does not stop at borders, and that every life given in the name of peace deserves remembrance. So let us speak their names, let us remember them, let us find out their stories, and let us teach their stories. And let us help raise that monument in Kelvin Grove that reflects that truth. Because if we are to truly honour those who served, we must remember all those who served. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting some of those numbers, and in fact we've got some posters here and some of those numbers are actually on the bar graph there. That overall there was 39 Victoria Crosses awarded throughout both World Wars, and some of the stats on the different ethnicities and the different faith groups that took part in the British Indian Army. So thank you so much for today, for all the speakers that have given us their thoughts, their reflections. And what I'd like to do now, actually, for the next, next sort of 10-15 minutes, I'd say, is I know we've got a nice audience gathered here, and I'd like for people, if anybody has their own history or connection to the British Indian Army, to raise their hand up and let us know. And we can take some comments. If anybody would like to make a comment of today's event in terms of the British Indian Army, then please do so. I think it's important for us as an organisation to gather this information, because I'm hearing through different channels that, such and such's grandfather and such's grandmother was working in India, in the factories as well, or in the fields at the time. But I just need to know in terms of the Scotland connection as well. And there might be stories that I've missed out, so it'd be wonderful to hear other people's connections. We've already heard from Jacob Stewart, we've heard from Mr. Andrew Lamb, and these were just by complete serendipity I came across them. So if anybody else has any stories, then please do let us know. Do you want to? Yep.
Yeah, just a story I want to share. I was blessed to.
Want to come to the front?
Yeah, my name is Imran Bashir. I'm the volunteer that went to Pakistan and traced the families of one of the dead soldiers, Muhammad, from Kingusi cemetery. I had been there with Umar Sheikh almost about 10 years ago when we first came across these graves, and I made him a commitment to track the families down because they were belonging to my family district of Gujarat. But we finally found the family, and it was Muhammad's brother's grandson that we met. But the story is far more deep. I mean, they didn't know what happened to their great uncle. I was able to show them the grave, the video. I was able to read the message from Isabel Harling, and they were moved. But there's a backstory. He had recently got married a few weeks before he was called to duty. And people asked him, don't go, you're newlywed. But he said, look, I made a commitment. I've got to honour that commitment. And he went to war and he died in the Highlands there. His wife was so grief-stricken, she didn't marry at all. She spent her entire life in grief. They had heard that he'd passed away, they had received a telegram, and they also found the interesting thing, they knew that he was involved in an accident where the lorry had turned upside down and he had died because of his injuries, and I didn't tell him that. So, but again, what's really crazy is the fact that I was at his wife's grave, making prayer for her, and 3 days later I was back at Kingusi at Muhammad's grave and making prayers for him, and almost fulfilling that promise of finally in his family known. But these stories are so much, it's not just the soldiers, it's the families behind them that have suffered and made the ultimate sacrifice. Thanks.
I remember actually when Amjad had come back, and in fact while he was there he was messaging me to find out the details of how we knew this person Muhammad had passed away. So it was really heartwarming to know that he was able to go and give some comfort to this soldier's family. And of course Muhammad's wife, she stayed with the family, and I think Amjad also visited the grave of his wife as well. So she never remarried. She stayed with the family where she was married into for the rest of her remaining life. So much emotion goes into these stories. Does anybody else have a connection? Yeah, Christian, do you want to come over and share your story? And of course there's also the story of the many women that took part in the British Indian Army. One of our posters at the very end talks about Mrs. Ragbir, who was from Glasgow. There's also the story of Noor Inayat Khan that I just briefly touched on, and of course Sophia Dalip Singh as well. So I'll not go into that, but if you get a chance, definitely check it out.
My name is Christian Marwaha, but I will take you slightly away from the Asian contributions to this. My father was a potato merchant in Africa, in Uganda, and chiefs there didn't want Africans to join the British Army. They were very against their soldiers or any British recruiting any Africans. My father was given a yellow permit. Though he was a potato merchant, he used to go to the villages to get potatoes. There he used to smuggle African soldiers in the middle of the night because British were worried about the route, what they call the trade route, the spice route from Cape of Good Hope. If they contest against the Indians, British have the control over, not the British, the Germans had the control over the Indian Ocean. Therefore, he used to take the transport, take them to Kenya. And from there they went to Mombasa. And from Mombasa they were probably transported to North Africa, where the African soldiers fought with the British and the Indian. Thank you. So we need to remember African soldiers as well, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the beauty of having a memorial will become a focal point for the community, and it will show, it's probably one of the biggest projects we'll be able to do as a community with different faiths contributing to this. So it's really important we do that. And like I said before, if anybody's interested in donating or even having their name on the memorial, come and speak to me. Like I said, there's just a few spaces left for the £10,000 slots on the memorial. But I think these stories are so valuable for us to know, especially when there's a Scotland connection, there's a Glasgow connection. I'm finding more and more I'm hearing through people. So, but I think if anybody else has got a story, okay.
Well, I'm Tariq Abdullah. I'm from Bangladesh Association Glasgow, and thank you for inviting me, Sakib. We've been together for some time, and I also went to KLOC, and thanks to Sakib and the team for that. It's not my personal connection, but we're doing some project on the Laskar's heritage with the Glasgow museums, and Duncan also was involved from the beginning. Just want to tell that it's a Laskar's contribution in the World War, in the First World War and also in the Second World War, and we did some research on that, and we know that there is a Laskar's cemetery in Calcutta, which is quite a large one. There's in the Newport. There's also a Laskar's who works in, who used to work in the merchant ship and who later joined in the in the British Indian Army, and they had a huge contribution. Just to tell you about that, and also we are doing our second stage show, which is the Laskar drama and their life in the sea, and that will happen in the cargo hall of the tall ship that Wembley on 21st of June is a 10th. And just before that, there will be a small exhibition on the upper floor of the ship, where we show some our finding on the research, including Laskar's contribution in the wars. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tariq, for that. The Lashkars, for those of you that don't know, are the South Asian sailors that came from South Asia, especially from Bangladesh area, and apparently they were in our docks from the 1920s or even earlier. In fact, I know that Duncan and Tariq were involved in this Lashkar project. There's a new exhibition on at Riverside Museum with some little figurines on a boat ship, definitely worth a visit, and you can see the Lashkar plaque that was founded at the Queen's Dock, I think it's called, Stop Cross Quay Docks, which is where the Crown Plaza is. Before all of that was, before the hotels and the SECC was made, it was all demolished, so the plaque was found there, and that's now on display. And that's actually, that plaque has contributed to a huge research project and discussion, and I believe it was on display at the Scotland Street School Museum exhibition that we had around about 2017, I think it was. So that's probably started some kind of discussion, but it's nice to see that other community groups are discovering their own heritage. So I think, without further ado, we'd like to try and get out for refreshments. I think Ravinder and you and I can do a quick photo thing. Sorry, there's one other person that's got a story. Shortly, yeah, short one. Okay.
Very briefly.
Very
My name is
briefly.
Mohammed Asif,
Okay.
Retired Lieutenant, Marine Engineering, Royal Navy. Just a request really, it's a most wonderful event this is, and wonderful stories that we've heard, and that must continue and continue to be supported. Just that connection, I think, with the past, we must also connect with the present as the timeline, that we do have service personnel from this community in active service of this crown and country, and that must also be acknowledged as such. But most wonderful event. Thank you very much.
Okay, I just think it's really wonderful to see people come together on this, shared history. I know every year I take up people to Kinusi, we have a great time on the bus, we have samosas, we have chai, we have sweet meats made by Auntie Gurdeep, is she?
Yes,
Here, yeah. So, and everybody chips in, it's an amazing event, it's a fun time. And the banter that you hear and the stories that people share, but to see this happening in the Gurdwara is amazing. And the significance of today's event in terms of, we live in uncertain times. There's a rise of the sort of anti-migrant narrative, the rise of the sort of right-wing racism's on the rise, Islamophobia, all of these things. And I think now more than ever before, we need to be united, not divided. We need to show that we were in this together. Hum sab ek hain, we're all one. especially when we're on the front lines fighting fascism, helping to protect Britain, and the fact that Scotland has such a strong connection. It's really useful. It's really important actually for people to know. I think after today, I don't want anybody to keep this to themselves. Go out there, share it with your neighbours, share it with people, try and find out, you know where I am, everybody knows me, let me know as well. We're going to be moving into People's Palace at some point, so it'd be nice to gather more stories, more objects as well for the museums. And of course the memorial, that's a multi-faith community project, so let's keep that going. Come and speak to me if you've got any fundraising ideas, I'd welcome them. I would like to, before I finish off, is to thank the Central Gurdwara, thank Pritpal, the team, Baji Ravinder, the Sikh media press, and of course, the community that have come together at such short notice to this event, because we want to be part of VE Day 80 to show that we are part of this, and we can be part of this remembrance as well. And I also want to thank the veterans that have helped to build this country, that fought in both the wars, particularly our forefathers, for their sort of sacrifices, their huge contributions. If it wasn't for that, I don't know what we'd be doing. We'd probably be speaking German. So I think I want to finish off by saying that South Asian history is British history. Both things go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I'd like to echo what Sakib has said. Thank you so much, all of you, for making time to be here, to be united, to commemorate those brave soldiers in the British Indian Army. And I'd like to also thank Pritpal and the Central Gurdwara volunteers here, and Sakib for doing a great job. It's been great working in partnership with yourselves. And I think if we all can work in partnership, we'll be able to achieve things much better and quicker. And if we all work together, we do need to leave a legacy behind for our children, our grandchildren, and we owe it to them to make sure that there is peace in this world. So let's do it together.
Yeah.
The best part, we get to have pakoras and samosas and chai. If you have time, please join us on the first floor, but you will have to take your shoes off before we go into the Langar Hall. We will also have an optional tour of the Gurdwara as well. And if you would like that, please, when you're in the Langar Hall, I will give a shout if anybody wants the tour, and then I'll take them round. Thank you so much for your time and your company.